Hi, Amber. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Whitney. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to touch on this subject, emotional eating, food attachments, binge eating, because it touches the physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental bodies. But so much of us who experience these issues think it's just this physical world. So I'd love to dive in to help us better understand how we create these habits and how we stop these habits with our body and our mind, and then kind of go into the deeper layers of maybe how this all comes up and how we can free ourselves from it.
Yeah, it's deep. So, what part do you want me to start with first? Because there's a lot there.
Well, what what's your dish what is your definition of emotional eating? How can people recognize that maybe their eating habits have a lot to do with emotions that they're struggling to deal with?
Yeah, totally. So, emotional eating, in my opinion, is any reason for eating other than physical nourishment. We are eating because we're bored, we're lonely, we're sad, we're happy, we don't know how to deal with our emotions or process them in a healthy way. So, we're using food to cope and shove them down, to distract, to numb, to avoid feeling. We don't feel worthy often when we're binge or emotionally eating. So, we're using food to try and fill a void that we're never going to fill with food. There's dozens of potential emotional eating triggers. And I love what you said earlier, that it is physical, emotional, energetic, and spiritual. It's not just physical or emotional. And I think that's one of the things that keeps so many people, especially women, because it's like 90% of the female population, unfortunately, struggling with these behaviors, is we just look at either the physical or the emotional, and we're not addressing all the potential triggers and layers that could be fueling the self-sabotage with food. Now, what's also interesting about emotional eating is physical imbalances can fuel emotional eating, like hormone issues. So as an example, if you have high cortisol, which is the stress hormone, it really messes with your blood sugar. You have more increased appetite levels. You have more cravings for refined sugar, refined salt, refined carbohydrates. So this hormone imbalance in itself can become an emotional eating trigger, because now your blood sugar is more skewed. If you don't eat consistently enough and you have a blood sugar crash, you get hangry, right? We all know that term. And then you're like, I'm just going to grab the first thing I can find. And then that triggers what I call the all or nothing mentality, which is like, screw it, I messed up. I ate that junk food and I wasn't supposed to. And then it's like, well, who cares? Now I'm going to eat whatever I want for the rest of the day or the week. And I'll start my diet Monday or next month, or I'll start eating clean next week. And that all stems from a hormone issue. And if you don't know you have that hormone issue, you can keep in the vicious cycle of emotional eating just from that, right? So then we see how hormone stuff can fuel emotional eating. I find weight loss and body image insecurity is a huge trigger for emotional eating, because if you get on that scale and you don't like the number you see, what are you doing? You're getting upset. You're saying, screw it, my clean eating exercise didn't work. I'm going to go eat all the stuff I wasn't allowing myself to have. And then, of course, the diet industry and diets are a massive trigger for emotional eating, because all diets teach us truly is food rules, food fears, more of what we shouldn't or can't eat, that we should be using a tool like a calorie app or points plan to count our food, rather than becoming intuitive and connected and going, what food feels good for me to eat, what satiates me, satisfies me, makes me feel good, and what doesn't, right? It's not, none of this is helping us tune in and tap into the body and become aware. So I find there's a multitude of triggers, but these are some of the things that amplify the most. But it really comes down to this lack of self-worth and not feeling good enough, and using food as a coping mechanism.
So for the person who's listening, who's struggling with binge eating or emotional eating, or not feeling balanced with how they're eating, how can they start to figure out where they need to start healing?
Yeah. So I think the first step is just admitting that you are using food as a coping mechanism, and trying to have as much compassion, and kindness for yourself as possible. It's not your fault. This behavior is so complex and multifaceted. We've never been taught how to deal with this, and we're often taught to just band-aid approach with it. So try to have compassion and kindness for yourself. I think the second step is, instead of trying to fix your food, it's so important we start to look at where the behavior came from in the first place. Were you bullied as a child? Like, when I was 5, my first day on the bus, the older boys called me fat and ugly. It like completely mortified me. And the next 20 years of my life, my identity was, I'm ugly and fat, right? So that was a traumatic experience that shaped the next 20 years of my life. Did you grow up in a household where diets were pushed on you? your stomach was poked at. You were told you were fat. You were body shamed from your parents. You watched your parents diet. You watched your parents be critical of other people's bodies. We inherit and take this stuff on, and we don't even realize it, right? So I think part of it is starting to see, like, where did this come from? Did you have a breakup, a traumatic experience? You have to move across the country, something that really caused you a lot of stress and emotional overwhelm. And then I think the second layer is we need to start understanding, what are our triggers? What's actually triggering you to binge and emotionally eat? Because the only way you're going to stop it and overcome the behavior is starting to actually take time to look at what's triggering you. So I always suggest starting to make a list of triggers, after it happens, forgive yourself, and then go, okay, like, let me start looking at this. What triggered me? Was I tired? Did I not drink enough water? Did I skip breakfast again? Right? Did I have a stressful day at work? Right? Did I get on the scale and not like the number that I saw? Overwhelm, anger, sadness, like, what's coming up? We must be aware of our triggers. And if you're not sure, what your triggers are, how to deal with that, honestly, I always suggest getting support. But then I think the other thing that's really important before we even get to food is what we also need to understand is so many women are binge eating and emotionally eating because they're last on their priority list. They're high achievers, they're perfectionists, they're overachievers, they run businesses, they have careers, they're moms, they have kids, they have families, they're in school, like we're playing so many roles as women. And we are the caregiver, the nurturer. We're literally giving birth and creating life. And so it's like we have so many responsibilities and we haven't been taught to also take care of ourselves. Right? We've been taught to take care of everyone else, but then as a consequence, our health and well-being gets significantly impacted. And so the other thing we need to look at is, where am I placing myself on my priority list? Because if I'm last, or I'm at, the last quarter of my list, I'm using food as a quick getaway from the busyness of my life, the overwhelm, the overbooked schedule, the 10 extra priorities I shouldn't have put on my list, but I did because I'm too afraid to say no. Because I don't know how to set boundaries, because I'm a people pleaser. The perfection who's like, I've got to prove to everybody that I am somebody, because you got bullied in school and you want to show everyone from your hometown that you made it, right? Like, I totally can attest to that one. I can attest to all of it. So it's like, when we're leading from insecurity, we're leading from self-loathing, we're leading from unworthiness, and we are leading from this place of needing to prove something because we don't fully feel enough, we don't fully feel confident, we put ourselves last or on the back burner. And then that causes so much stress in the body and so much emotional unrest that when you have 5 minutes, instead of thinking to breathe or to maybe meditate for 5 minutes or get outside for 5 minutes, get your feet in the grass, right? What are you doing? You're like, oh my gosh, I just need a quick escape. And food is the fastest, easiest thing we can go to. And so I think we need to start really being honest with ourselves of where we are on our priority list. Because the lower you are, the easier it is for you to get triggered, because you're overwhelmed, you're tired, you're emotional, you're vulnerable, and there's a lot going on. So it's like food isn't even like on the top 3, right? But of course, one of the things I think is so important is that we start to prioritize sitting down and eating our food. I mean, especially you being, the chef and creator you are, like, I can't imagine, taking a meal that you've just created and poured your heart into and just like going back to my desk and like eating it without paying attention and working and like driving and all that. Oh my gosh, no, like, I want to sit down. I want to create a mindful eating practice. And I think this is where women get so busy that they don't prioritize nourishing their bodies. So we're working in multitasking, driving and eating, shoving something in our mouths to just get through the day, not eating enough, surviving off caffeine and empty calorie. And of course, by the end of the day, your body's going to be like, feed me, and you have a surge of hunger, and then you overeat because you didn't tend to your body through the rest of the day. So if we can start picking one meal a day to eat mindfully and slowly, and shut off the TV, shut off your phone, shut the computer off, and tune into yourself and your food, you're going to digest better, you're going to chew and eat thoroughly, put your fork down between bites, and guess what? You're going to feel satiated, not only physically, but emotionally. Another reason women emotionally eat all the time is because they're not satiated physically and emotionally from their food because they weren't present. And then they're like, oh, I finished that. What else can I get? And you go dig through the cupboard. And that shifts a lot when you bring in more mindfulness and you slow down.
Yeah, it's amazing when you sit and eat a meal at the table versus on the couch versus away from your computer or your television or your phone. I find the easiest thing for me is just to go outside. If I can go outside, that naturally calms my nervous system. I get distracted by looking at vegetation or birds or something else that you don't realize that you're by yourself or you don't have
Yeah.
the entertainment from a phone or a television. That really helps me.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think the other thing about bringing in mindfulness and like that presence is you build a different connection with your food. Like appreciate where your food came from and that you made it or whomever. And it's just like food is such an important part of our vitality and our health and well-being on every level. And I think we often just take it for granted. And some people say, I wish I just didn't even have to eat. It's too time consuming. It's blah, blah, blah. It's like making me gain weight. It's making me, and it's like, no, it's medicine. It's healing. It's powerful. We just need to heal your relationship with food so you can have a different perception of it.
Yeah.
And did you know?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because this is important. This is like mind blowing. When you eat and you're distracted by TV, phone, computer, you're likely to eat up to 40% more than if you were eating at the table. It's significant. Yeah.
That's a huge amount, and that should help bring everybody back to the table.
Yeah. Plus, you're going to connect with yourself or your family.
Yeah, and I was going to say food is pleasure. And I've met those people, and I used to be an HR manager, and I've worked with those people as well that were looking for solutions to not eat, how they could just get fuel in faster so they can continue to get their work done. And food is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be a pleasurable human experience that we get to do depending on, how your body makeup is and what works for you 1, 2, 3 times a day. So take advantage of it. I mean, do it right. Make sure you're choosing food that's actually going to nourish you and refuel your body and be brain food, but enjoy it.
Yeah, that is really the key. But we get conditioned to loathe food and have a love-hate relationship with it because when we're in binge eating, emotional eating, food addiction, and you're losing control with food, oftentimes we're picking foods that are highly processed, full of MSG, aspartame, refined sugar, and other ingredients made in a lab on purpose to make you addicted, to increase your appetite levels, to give you a massive dopamine high and make you, have that loss of control. And so I think it's unfortunate because it skews what could be a very powerful relationship with food if we're eating more whole foods and we learn how to prepare them and enjoy them and how amazing of an experience that can be. But we start to have that love-hate relationship because we can't gain control with it, especially if it's processed. And even like I went through a phase where I was no longer eating processed food. I was binging on like a whole huge bag of cashews and like pecans and a whole jar of raw natural peanut butter and 10 bananas. Like we start to understand that like it's so much deeper than the food. The food's giving us a dopamine high, that numbing, but we hate it at that point because it's like, it's making me bloated. I can't stop eating. I don't want to think about food anymore. I'm tired of obsessing over my next binge and my next diet. It's making me gain weight. It's messing with all these things. But then in the moment, you just want your dopamine high so bad and that quick fix so bad. And you like go into that love moment, but then you hate it again. But when you heal your relationship with food, you truly get to love it. Because like you said, it is a beautiful experience. It's a pleasurable thing. There's so many incredible things to try. It's just though, like there's that, gap or bridge to gap, like, or gap to bridge through this like whole fighting with it because you're using it for the misaligned reasons, right? When you're using it to hurt your body versus to support healing your body.
Is there something that the people that are listening can learn to do when they're in that moment where they want to binge on food, they want to overeat knowing that they're full, but they want to keep going? Is there something they can say to themselves? Is there a practice that they can start? Or do they just need to start recognizing every time it happens that they need to start kind of diving deeper into the emotion of what's really there?
I think if they can start to dive into the emotion of what's really there, that's a great place to start. However, it's hard in the moment. Your eyes glaze over. You want the quick fix dopamine reward. You've already made up your mind that you're going to eat and lose control. You have this negative voice in your mind I like to call the ego that's like, just eat it and eat it all and get it out of the house. And you started, so now you can't stop until it's all gone. It can't be here tomorrow. You can't lose control again. So it's not just so cut and dry as to like be like, oh, I have an urge to binge. I'm going to stop myself and I'm going to go upstairs and journal. It's not that easy. And I don't want to sugarcoat it for people because I feel you and I get what you're going through, and it's just not. So part of it at first, like I said earlier, is you need to start to become aware of what's triggering you. That's very important. And ideally you want to start asking yourself just before you go to food, is this physical hunger? Do I actually need to eat, or is this emotional? But where we can hit a block for a lot of women is that a lot of women have a lack of hunger signal. Their appetite signal, their hunger cue is not strong and it's not kicking in regularly. And that's because there's a lot of women with thyroid issues, whether they realize they have a thyroid issue or not. And a lot of women say, well, I'm not hungry, so I'm just not going to eat. And I'm like, no, that's a problem. That is a sign that your metabolism is sluggish and you likely have a thyroid issue, because when we lack a hunger signal, your metabolism slows down, you burn through your food, aka your energy, more slowly, and then your body doesn't produce as much ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone that makes you hungry, to give you the signal. So if you don't eat because you think, oh, I'm not hungry, so I'm not going to eat, that suppresses your metabolism more, stresses out other hormones even more, makes it harder for your body to produce that hunger hormone. And so it can be confusing when you're like, well, I'm not hungry, so I don't know if it's like physical hunger or emotional hunger, because I don't even know what physical hunger feels like. This is where we get, like, you're hearing it's so complex. This is why it's like not as cut and dry of like one tool or one answer, because there could be so many potential things going on for somebody, and we need to address and investigate the roots. So, I suggest you get your hormones tested. I do that with my clients all the time. I think it's important to like understand that not being hungry isn't normal, and not eating is going to just amplify overeating, binge eating, or loss of control with food later in the day. And then the next day you're going to wake up and try and compensate by not eating, right? So I'm just covering all this because I always connect with women who are like, but I'm not hungry, so I can't tell physical versus emotional hunger. But it's like a stomach growl, a hunger signal. You look at the clock and realize you haven't eaten in a few hours, right? You get hangry, dizzy, faint, lightheaded, irritable. Those are all signs of physical hunger. Versus emotional hunger, we've already talked about, right? So ask yourself, is this physical or emotional hunger? And if you're like, I actually am hungry, can you go and pick something that's nourishing? Can you eat it slowly? And then follow up and ask yourself again thereafter, do I still have emotional hunger, right? But this is such a powerful, important question for you to ask yourself, because if you know it's emotional, then you know it's time to go, and ideally, as soon as you can, get out of the area with the food and the temptation and go and breathe, get outside, pull out a journal, start exploring like, what's going on? Why am I feeling this way? Right? But if you are like, I've tried all this, I'm doing all this, none of it is working, and you've been dealing with this for years and decades, like, my question is like, why haven't you considered investing in support yet? Because oftentimes we'll convince ourselves it's not a big deal. Everyone does it. Oh, all I need is another self-help book. And it's like, there's so many layers here. It's so complex. What if you actually considered like, addressing it from the roots? But that would be my tip is this physical or emotional hunger? Because you're going to get your answer as you build awareness around it.
Yeah, it's not mentally something that you can just step out of doing without support. And what I have found from different friends that I've talked to over the years, simply reading a book isn't going to cure you of this habit and the reaction that you currently have to certain triggers. So if people want to get help, how can they start to find the right people in their area or online to support them?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that's important to look for in whomever you seek support from is that you feel really safe reaching out to them, and that they hold a really safe, non-judgmental space for you to share what you're struggling with, what's on your heart. Because it's very vulnerable to open up that you're struggling with binge or emotional eating or any of these things, especially for the first time. I know the only time I went to seek out support was one time, and it was a psychologist. And I'm not poo-pooing psychologists because I know there's a lot of great ones, but I poured my heart out to her. I spent money I didn't have. And the response back was, well, just don't go to the store and buy the food. You just need to learn to love yourself. And that is not going to help empower you on your journey to food and body freedom. You need to feel safe and heard and supported. And ideally, I think it's also important to seek support from someone who's been through and has healed what you are currently going through. The relatability factor is huge, and they will understand the way your brain is functioning, that your thoughts, your behaviors, why you have them, right? And this person should be able to help you fully overcome it. If you've been working with someone for 5+ years and you're still binge or emotional eating, you might not be with the right person, or you need to then ask yourself, am I taking things home and like taking action and embodying and changing, right? So I think the safe space is important, working with someone who's been through what you've gone through and can really like understand what you're going through, and someone who's going to lovingly hold you accountable, lovingly call you out when it's appropriate, but give you a lot of love, compassion, and empathy. And like I said, help you feel safe, and also equip you with the tools, the support, and the guidance, whether that is someone locally for you or that is someone online. But they should be able to help you fully overcome the behavior, and you should start to see, some traction in the first few weeks at least, or a couple of months of working together.
Have you ever done or had clients do alternative therapies to help heal binge eating or emotional eating beyond just self-talk?
Can you say that again? You cut out.
Yeah. Have you worked with or know anyone that has done kind of alternative therapies to heal their binge eating and emotional eating instead of traditional talk therapy?
Yeah, so I don't do talk therapy. It's very much like coaching, guidance, support. I find that talk therapy doesn't work in most part for this kind of thing, because it's one thing, yes, we want to talk, we want to get it out, but then if you're not held accountable, you're literally dealing with this ego mind in your head that is like so wired to keep you in this comfort zone of using food to cope. When we think about healing our relationship with food and body, building body love, learning to love and accept ourselves and claim our worth, your nervous system and your subconscious mind are so wired that that is not safe. That is uncomfortable. That is unfamiliar. We do not want to do that because we need you to be alive and we need you to survive. And what is survival and safe is binge eating, emotional eating, being hard on yourself, dieting, quick fixing, weight loss, gimmicks, like all of that. So what we have to understand is just talking about it is not going to help you rewire your brain, shift your subconscious, help your nervous system feel safe. So when I work with my clients, and I'm sure there's others that do the same, which I think really helps us transform and fully overcome it, it is about integrating tools. It is about providing step-by-step processes. It is about going deep into a trigger in a coaching session and going, oh, people pleasing is an emotional eating trigger for you. Let's look at what's below that. Oh, overwhelm is below that. Oh, because you're overbooked and you're afraid to set boundaries because you're afraid to let other people down, because ultimately what's below that is you are chasing validation from others instead of being able to give it to yourself. And you are terrified of other people getting upset with you or abandoning you if you set a boundary or said no. What's below that is I don't feel good enough. I don't feel worthy. So we want to look at getting to the roots of what each trigger is, because each trigger is a teacher, and then being able to provide tools, coaching, support, and guidance on how they can learn how to set healthy boundaries, overcome people pleasing, deal with the trigger in a healthy way. Like that to me is the ultimate. And not only that, we can do the hormone testing. We can see which hormones are fueling emotional eating. We can regulate your blood sugar. We can improve your gut health, right? We can get rid of your cravings. We can get rid of your PMS or menopause, improve your fertility. We get to work on all of it. And the cool thing is, as my clients heal, guess what? Their intuition comes online. They're like, I think I'm a sensitive empath. I'm afraid to feel. I'm afraid to access my gifts. And so then we work on energy hygiene, energy tools, energy protection, like energetic boundaries, like all these other things that come in. So that's like what I find is really empowering for people, because as you heal layer by layer, other things come up that need to be addressed. And we need to understand that the journey takes time, and it's not this quick, like in a week or a month, everything's going to be fixed. You're dealing with years of programming, subconscious programming, and nervous system like imprints, which are essentially like behaviors and acting a certain way that is going to take time for it to feel familiar and safe for you, to feel worthy, to set boundaries, to stop using food as a coping mechanism and integrate other things. And so we have to take all of that into account while we're healing our relationship with food, and integrate, like I integrate tapping, EFT tapping. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yes.
Yeah. So we do customized tapping scripts. We do mind mapping sessions, all kinds of cool things that will help shift the subconscious, get into the cells in the body, regulate the nervous system, help you feel safe. Because in order for you to truly transform, you must feel safe, and you can't be forced to change.
Yes.
You've got to take the journey at the pace that feels good for you. And that's going to look different for everybody. I hope that helps answer your question.
It does, because those are a lot of the tools that I think naturally need to step out more to help people heal. Because it isn't just a conversation that you can map out in the mind. That I thought you brought up something really important, which is, spiritual hygiene. So much of us collect other people's stuff, and that weighs on us. And sometimes we'll eat for other people's issues that we're feeling. And that doesn't necessarily make sense unless you're someone that has felt that before, that extra weight that doesn't belong to you. So I'm so glad that you bring that up. Can you tell me a little bit more about the different suggestions you have people do if they're working on energetic hygiene?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll work through a variety of different things. Some of it's like just simple integration. Like, do you have a piece of jewelry with like black obsidian, black tourmaline, black quartz, something to just help protect your energy field? Do you have a sage spray to help clear your field? We can get into a bit of simple energy clearing and clear you of, like you said, emotional residue is essentially where people's stuff is in your field and it feels heavy for you. And then this is where we start to get into, okay, what are you giving your energy to that is not serving you? What unhealthy relationships and I mean it with love, but the energy vampires that aren't good for you, that you're clinging on to because you don't want to like upset them, and you feel bad if you set a boundary or you distance yourself, right? So we need to work on those things and being honest with ourselves. You know what? This relationship just doesn't feel like it's serving me anymore. And if it's not someone you can cut ties with, like how can I create some distance and protect myself? I think learning to connect with our guides and angels and our teams and asking for support and loving protection from them is really powerful and important. I think there's different meditations and different breath work and like there's so many tools we can use, but I really love to help my clients get into like clearing collective energy, clearing emotional residue, and having them be aware of what are you giving your energy to? How much are you worrying about this thing that actually is never going to happen? Social media and like world events. Yes, be informed, but if something feels really heavy and dense, why are you still watching it? Why are you continuing to watch it? Every time you finish watching it, you're so stressed. You're in such a deep mode of fear. Your frequency is dropped like from love to anger, right? Like, be aware the content you're consuming is just as important, if not more important, than the food you're eating because it shifts your frequency. And I think a lot of people don't realize that our technology emits frequencies. You can be, commenting on a social media post and you're now interacting with every energy of every person on that post and their, projection energy and their anger and their disagreement with your comment is now in your field. So it's not just you on social media, it's you and millions or billions of other energies, right? So I think it's like, okay, why am I still doing this? Why am I mindlessly scrolling and engaging in things that make me feel like garbage, emotionally and energetically, just like this food. If I eat a whole pint of ice cream and a whole bag of Oreos, I'm going to feel like crap, right? So tech boundaries to me are important. Being aware of how certain social media methods, TV shows, things like that impact our field, right? Certain music you're going to listen to. Like all these things emit energy and frequency. And a lot of people also don't realize that all mainstream music is recorded at 440 hertz, which is the frequency that agitates the soul. And that 432 hertz is the harmonizing frequency that is aligned with the soul. And, it can be as subtle as maybe you listen to some music and then you feel agitated and then that triggers you to emotionally eat. It's deeply powerful, but it's subtle when we get into energy because it's invisible. And so this is where as you heal and you build attunement, you're going to start to pick up on these things and it's going to help you feel more inspired and motivated to make these other shifts and changes. Because I never used to be aware of any of this until I started healing. And I'm like, wow, I'm so sensitive. This is a good thing. My body and my intuition are my barometer. But now, this is kind of like, I've got to make some changes here because this is really impacting my energy. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It's a lifestyle shift. You can heal yourself of absolutely anything, but it will require you to evolve, but only in good ways. And the things that just really don't serve you and never did will naturally fall off.
Yeah. 100%. It's so true. And so much good comes from it. Like, I wouldn't have had this business if I didn't heal my relationship with food. I wouldn't be here with you right now, right? It's like, there's so many gifts that have unfolded because I healed my relationship with food. And the biggest thing of all is like, I have peace with my body and food. And that is like the most freeing, like reassuring thing ever. And to have so much more space in my mind to not be like food, worry, fear, control, like it's freeing and everyone deserves to feel that.
I completely agree. That's very much as to why I do this podcast. Is I want everyone to feel good in their body because they should. That's part of the human experience. And so the more we put off healing these type of issues, it's holding you back from fully living your life.
It is, totally.
Which I know you have, you talk about on your website, same. I love it. Well, one thing I did want to just touch on for people is taming food cravings. how can somebody go about first kind of recognizing and tackling food cravings that they get frequently?
I love that. That's a great question. So I think the first thing is just to be aware of what are you craving? Is it sugar? Is it salt? Is it creamy foods? Right? Is it breads, pastas, fast foods? Like what is it? Or is it everything? And you eat sweet and then you want salty, right? Because that happens sometimes. And to be aware that our refined cravings are not accurate cravings. The more refined cravings we have, just a sign that our physical, emotional, energetic, and spiritual body is quite out of whack. Okay, we should have zero cravings and or crave things that come from nature. Like maybe you're deficient in iron and you need more like turmeric or spinach or red meat if you're a meat eater. Maybe if you're craving sugar, you might be deficient in chromium, right? So to me it's like you'd crave cinnamon or something along those lines, but most of us aren't. We're craving processed foods. And so the first thing, be aware of what you're craving. And then the second thing is, okay, here's an example. So sugar. I often find many people will crave sugar physically because they're highly stressed. They're not eating enough protein and fat. They're eating a ton of refined sugar, which is very addictive and just makes you crave even more. Emotionally, they're lacking joy and love in life, and they're lacking sweetness emotionally in life. Yeah, and that was me to a T. And so we unconsciously crave sugar thinking it's going to balance out this lack of joy or love or this lack of sweetness in our life, even though it doesn't, right? So pull out a journal. Ask yourself, like, where am I lacking joy or love or sweetness in life? And usually one of the answers is going to be with me and myself, right? Because that lack of self-love, we don't feel happy with ourselves and our bodies. And so we get those refined cravings. I often find people will crave salt again because of high stress levels, lots of mineral deficiencies, thyroid issues, adrenal fatigue, cortisol issues. The more stressed your body is, the more quickly you're burning through your minerals. So you're going to have more of those processed cravings. We crave a lot of ice cream, baked goods, cheeses, pastas, breads. We're lacking comfort. We don't know how to comfort ourselves properly emotionally. Instead we're reaching for food. And when you think of being a kid and going to grandma's house and all the comfort food you got to eat, right? And so we seek that. So it's like, how can I comfort myself without food? Chocolate I find is also a comfort, but it's also for women, magnesium deficiency. And about a week before our cycles, we will crave more of it because of the hormone fluctuations. So can you add in more real dark raw cacao? Can you do more like nuts and seeds and leafy greens that are rich in magnesium and minerals like electrolytes, Epsom salt baths? So your cravings, just like your triggers, are a guide and a key to try and get your attention and show you where you're out of alignment, physically, emotionally, energetically, or spiritually. Now, are you willing to go there? Are you willing to explore? Are you willing to ask some questions or listen to resources or whatever you need to do to get the answers and then take some steps, right? Because once you realign what is out of alignment, you learn the lesson that you need to learn from the trigger or the craving, it will dissolve. I used to crave sugar like 100 out of 10. I would speed to the store. Like I'd make up excuses to leave parties. I was so addicted to sugar. I haven't craved sugar in like 12 years. This is the healing. This is what happens. Plus, blood sugar regulation, things like that. But you get to be free of it. But those are the things I would encourage you to start kind of like exploring. Ask yourself some questions.
What causes people to eat fast food? That one has always fascinated me.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. I think part of it is a comfort because there's lots of breads, lots of cheeses, right? Like like a lot of really like heavy food. But I think a big part of it is that the processed food is extremely loaded with things like MSG, monosodium glutamate, which increases the appetite levels, gives us a massive dopamine high. And dopamine is the mood boosting neurotransmitter that we produce in really fast, large amounts, especially when we eat really processed food. It's full of a lot of sugar. They put sugar in the French fries. I've heard that some of these places line their drink cups with MSG. So your coffee is full of MSG and you get addicted to it. So I think there's a lot of ingredients in these processed fast food companies. And you can go online, and if you dig hard enough, you will find the ingredients list, and it will not surprise you as to why you crave it so much and you're so addicted to it, because of the ingredients that are literally put in to give you the perfect high, just like heroin or a hard drug. And also because they don't really satiate us. That's what I find, right? Like it's a lot of empty calories. It's a lot of like lab made food. It's the lowest quality food you can get. And it's really unfortunate. Like I'm really hold the intention for the day where that like every human being on this planet has access to the healthiest, most nutritious food and can afford to eat healthy and nutritious food. Because I know for some people they're like, it's all I can afford, and my heart freaking goes out to them. I'm just like, no, like it shouldn't be this way. That should not be your only choice. You know
It's
what I
not the
mean?
only choice. Rice and beans is always cheaper. You can
That's a
always
good
go to the
point.
grocery
Yeah.
store. You can always buy rice and you can always buy whole beans, soak them, cook them in water at home. That is a cheap and healthy meal. So
Yeah.
the fast food excuse that that is all I can afford is an excuse to continue their bad habits. But there's always
Yeah.
real
Well
food
said.
out there that is at a better price.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you said that. But yeah, so I think a lot of it is the ingredients that they're putting in. And I think it's also the shiny marketing that gets, deeply programmed into our subconscious mind. People see it, then they want it. These marketing companies are spending billions and trillions of dollars on marketing, right? Like it's crazy the level of like intelligence that has been put into marketing campaigns for all like fast food and processed food. They even put the cereal boxes for kids on the lower aisles so it's easy for the kids to grab the cereal box. Like it's ridiculous how it's all like designed, right?
Yeah, but I always go back to personal responsibility. There will always be a side of the world and businesses that are in business to sell and make money, but we all have a choice every day. And I know when anyone's in an emotional eating or a binge eating stage, it's you can't talk yourself out of something, but when we're all at a balanced, grounded, safe space, we get to make a choice of how we spend our money and what we put inside our body to fuel us. So I think it's just great that people are starting to recognize how the grocery store system works and how the fast
Mm-hmm.
food system works and the restaurant industry works. But you get to take personal responsibility and not play the victim that, oh, they set me up to purchase the product. You still get to decide whether or not you go home with the product.
Right. But I think a lot of people don't know. And I never used to know. I didn't know for the first 24 years of my life, right? Like you trust these companies, you trust their advertising. I think another big thing that a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't either, was my pineal gland was calcified. I couldn't sense deception. I couldn't discern. I was eating what was available at the store. And so whilst, it's no excuse, like a lot of people just don't know. And when you're brought up in a certain family with certain food and you have access to like any kind of junk food you want and nothing is off limits and you don't learn proper nutrition and you don't learn any of this, like it's so innocent, right? So I feel like a lot of people don't even know. They just think that it's normal to eat, you know, Fruit Loops for breakfast and like the what are they, the fish, the goldfish as a snack, and like you know what I mean? Like I feel because I used to be one of those people, so I have to have compassion for them because we just sometimes don't know, and it's innocent.
Absolutely. Well, where can people start to connect with you and learn more from you and find out the different options and tools that you have to help them with binge eating, emotional eating, or just trying to find balance with food?
Yeah, so the best place is the website. It's amberapproved.ca. You can take the free emotional eating quiz there if you're wondering if you're struggling. You can also book a consultation. It's complimentary and it's 30 minutes. We connect on Zoom and we can talk more about your relationship with food, body image, weight, hormones, whatever is going on for you, and explore going on a journey. And you can also listen to the No Sugarcoating Podcast. We have almost 500 episodes. So that is available on all apps and the website. And if you want some social media places to follow, I'm on Instagram and YouTube, and my name is Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk.
Perfect. I have two more questions for you. I would love to know, since you're so in the health and wellness and food space, what are you loving eating right now? Like, what is fueling you and making you feel good in this season?
Oh, I love that question. So I'm like big into my smoothie in the morning. I load it with like berries and cinnamon and collagen and all kinds of good stuff. And I've always been a big turkey fan, but just like I have either like turkey or chicken every day, just like high in serotonin, so good for the mood. And we've been eating a lot of chives because we just moved into a new house and the garden had like a chive plant and it's huge. It's like, it's massive. And so I'm like, what else can I make chives with? Because I'm never going to use them all. So that's been really cool to add a lot more chives into different meals and cooking and things like that.
That is, I love that. You can make chive butter, you can make chive salt, like so many things that you can do. And it's just a beautiful garnish on basically everything.
Agreed. I'll have to make the butter. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good idea.
Yeah, because then you can save it and put it in the fridge or freeze it, and then you're good to go. And you can pull out little pieces from the freezer and put it on your salmon or on your chicken and bake that up. And that'll be a good one for kind of later in the year. And then I also wanted you to just leave our listeners with maybe one last health supportive tip that they can consider adding into their life.
I think it's be patient, take the journey one step at a time, because these habits and behaviors didn't accumulate overnight. And why would it be any different to change it? One day at a time, one step at a time. Don't give up on yourself. Keep reaching out for support, getting the right resources. You will find what you need, but just be patient because it is going to take some time.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Amber, and chatting about this topic, which is really important in the health and wellness and food space. And it needs to be talked about more often so people aren't scared to approach it and heal it.
Thank you for having me. And I totally agree with everything you just said.